Terrorist given Canada government job. Man wanted by India on Canada's payroll. Wanted Sidhu works for border agency. Trudeau's tax-funded terrorist. India gives proof. Will Trudeau act? Trudeau's hypocrisy exposed.
What I'm about to show you on 5 Live today takes India's allegations against Canada entirely to the next level. This is not about finger-pointing. This is not about just hypocrisy. This has now reached an alarming dimension. And I'm going to be telling you about it here on 5 Live. Thanks as always for being with me here on the show. I'm Shiv. Canada, a country that has accused India, as you well know, of killing a designated terrorist with a foreign death squad, has just been forced to make the most shocking admission, viewer. And I hope both the Canadian and Indian public are listening very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The Canadian government has been forced, viewer, to confirm that a man designated as a terrorist by India, a man accused in the murder of a Shaurya Chakra awardee, a man reported to be a member of a group that is banned even by Canada, and is a Canadian government employee. That's the man you see on your screen here. That's right. A terrorist named Sandeep Singh Sidhu, who India has officially made an extradition request for, is a Canadian government employee. In other words, the salary of a man designated as a terrorist and wanted by the world's largest democracy is a Canadian government employee whose salary is paid by the Canadian public. The Canada Border Services Agency, or CBSA, a government entity entrusted with the very sensitive task of border security, has confirmed to an Indian news portal that Sandeep Singh Sidhu is one of its employees. I hardly need to spell out the alarming implications of this admission, but I shall do so because it has become clear now that the Trudeau government is keener to accuse journalists like me for foreign interference rather than even acknowledge how bad this looks for Canada internationally. That Prime Minister Trudeau's accusations have led to strained relations between the two countries is an understatement. Both countries have stripped each other, as you well know, of their high commissioners, and this ill-tempered exchange between India and Canada has led to many Canadian skeletons tumbling one after the other out of an old cupboard of dirty Canadian secrets. But the Sandeep Singh Sidhu admission by the Canadian government takes things to a dangerous new level. This confession by the Canadian government made to the Prince reporter Bismi Tuskin adds an alarming dimension to India's allegations against Canada. This angle confirms that Canada is not only a safe haven for India-designated terrorists, but that Canada actively employs them into state-funded positions of a sensitive nature that actually require extra background checks and scrutiny. Did you know that the CBSA, the Border Security Agency of Border Services Agency of Canada, that employs this terrorist Sandeep Singh Sidhu, do you know what it does? It's the Canadian state agency responsible for border security, immigration enforcement, and facilitating legitimate trade and travel. Just think about that for a moment, viewer. And I know the Canadian public is watching this as well very closely. A man wanted by the world's largest democracy, that is India, designated as a terrorist by India's National Investigation Agency, and likely a member of a youth extremist group banned even in Canada, is in a position to influence Canada's border security, immigration, trade, and travel. How has a person with ties to terror activities been able to secure a government job in Canada especially in a sensitive area like border services, where the recruitment process involves some of the deepest screening of any Canadian government body? The only possible explanation is that Sandeep Singh Sidhu has been deliberately handpicked, deliberately chosen by the Canadian government to fill a sensitive post, specifically so that his criminal skills can be harnessed and deployed for other reasons, perhaps to facilitate the passage of criminals and separatists from Punjab to Canada. For all of Trudeau's grandstanding about terror, the Sandeep Singh Sidhu issue is a landmine that the Trudeau government cannot sidestep and has had no choice but to admit to when asked. The employment of Sidhu at the CBSA is a hilarious contradiction to Canada's stated position on counter-terrorism. It also completely undermines, if not exposes, Canada's criticism of India for allegedly targeting individuals on foreign soil, as it implies a willingness to overlook and accommodate those accused of terrorism by India, even in public government positions. At the very least, Canada's admission that it employs Sandeep Singh Sidhu in a government job proves India's point, doesn't it, View? I'm sure you agree with me. And it gives the Indian government enormous leverage to argue that Canada's leniency towards individuals with extremist or terrorist links poses a threat to India's national security. Whether it is Canadian National Police documents suggesting the Canadian government's direct role in the Air India Kanishka bombing in 1985, or the public funding of a designated terrorist in government jobs, Canada has reached a reputational point of no return. Justin Trudeau and his government's hypocrisy, like I just showed you, has been beyond exposed. It is no longer just about exposing hypocrisy. Now it is about an act of war against India. After accusing India and its diplomats of alleged violent criminal activities in Canada, Trudeau's government, like we've just shown you, himself employs a man wanted by the Indian anti-terror agency, Sandeep Singh Sidhu, wanted for promoting terrorist activities in Punjab and the murder of a Shaurya Chakra awardee in Punjab in 2020 named Balwinder Singh Sandhu. He's wanted for all of that. You heard that right. India's most wanted is on the payroll of the Trudeau government. The Canadian public pays this man's salary. Sidhu is a Canada Border Services Agency employee. In fact, he holds the position of a superintendent. Let's give you even more details. Canada's border agency has confirmed to a media outlet, The Print, that Sidhu is indeed its employee. According to the NIA dossier that has been shared with Canada seeking Sidhu's extradition many years ago, Sandeep Singh Sidhu is accused of promoting terrorist activities in Punjab. He also has links with Pakistan-based Lakhbir Singh Road, the nephew of Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. Sidhu is also a member of the International Sikh Youth Federation, a group that reportedly remains banned not just in India, Australia, Japan, and the US, but even in Trudeau's Canada. India Today, remember, was the first to report that India has shared information so far, including dossiers with the Trudeau government on Sandeep Singh Sidhu and several others. And now it comes to the fore via this confession to a media outlet by the Canadian government that Sandeep Singh Sidhu is a government employee. How was Sandeep Singh Sidhu, a man designated as a terrorist by India, how did he become a government employee in Canada? Wouldn't the alarm bells have rung when the Canadian government was conducting a background check on him? This man is wanted by the world's largest democracy, so how can Canada justify it? He cleared an officer trainee entrance exam, tells you a lot about Canada's quality control. Number two, he interviewed and was assessed psychologically fit. His credit was checked. Law enforcement and security database was verified. Got an enhanced reliability status, and then he was recruited into the Canada Border Services Agency, which makes me wonder out loud, viewer, that it wasn't about the alarm bells that could have been ringing when a background check was conducted on this man, because, as you can see, there are infinite alarm bells about his terrorist and criminal ties. I go ahead and say that this man has been handpicked by the Canadian government in order to fulfill a particular role when it comes to immigration of criminals and terrorists into Canada. That's what is happening right now. Okay, I want to go across now and get a word in from India. Today is Gaurav Sawant. He's been attending the BRICS summit, and he's been keeping a very close eye on all developments taking place between India and Canada as well. Gaurav, the finger pointing and the exchange and the crossfire between India and Canada has been going on for more than a week now, but the Sandeep Singh Sidhu angle is explosive, because here we have a situation where a man accused of terrorism, a man that India has asked to be extradited, a man accused of killing a Shaurya Chakra awardee in Punjab in 2020 and tied to multiple terror activities that have been detailed in a dossier officially and formally shared with Canada. This man, Sandeep Singh Sidhu, Gaurav, is a Canadian government employee in the most sensitive possible position, border security, Gaurav.
Shiv, not just an employee, he's actually a superintendent in the border security agency in Canada. And that just shows how grave the situation is, how serious the problem is that India faces with Canada. The External Affairs Minister, he's talked about this at great length. In fact, the Prime Minister at the BRICS summit, at this multilateral forum, he exposed the doublespeak of several countries when it comes to cross-border terrorism. And he did not name either Canada or the United States of America, but the situation is so clear. So whether it's a country like China or a country, that claims to be rules-based, order-based countries like Canada and the United States of America, Shiv, India has given multiple dossiers to Canada on Sandhu. India has given details of where he's working, what his role has been, how he has been involved in the killing of a Shaurya Chakra awardee in the Bhikiwind area of Taran in Punjab. All those details have been shared with Canada. He's not a fugitive from law. He's not somebody who's hiding from law. He's a part of law enforcement in Canada. And India has made that very, very clear to agencies in Canada. And yet, Justin Trudeau, despite his pontification, he's taken absolutely no action against these elements. The point that you've raised, Shiv, is very clear. These elements are actually used by Canadian agencies and authorities against India. And these elements are actually elements of the Canadian deep state to destabilize India. And that's a charge that's been leveled, not just by agencies. Yes. That's a charge that's actually been said by the External Affairs Minister of India.
You know, Gaurav, the reason why the Sandeep Singh Sidhu issue is very different from what we've been talking about so far is that one wonders whether, the Canada or even the US government will be able to justify or defend something of this kind, because India has ticked all the boxes. They've supplied the dossier, they've supplied information, they've sought an extradition, they've given information about why they want this man to be extradited, and yet this man continues to be in a law enforcement role in Canada. Beyond embarrassing Canada, one wonders whether this is going to be enough to, in some ways, turn the narrative and actually see some kind of cooperation from the West. Will it happen?
Very unlikely, Shiv. You're absolutely right. Now, if you go by facts, Justin Trudeau and the Canadian administration should be deeply embarrassed. Joe Biden, the American president, and the American administration, the American State Department, they should be deeply embarrassed. But that's only when you actually believe in rules-based order. But when you use terrorist organizations to destabilize countries and yet pontificate, that just shows that they believe in doublespeak and they practice that doublespeak and they create an ecosystem. They create an ecosystem even in countries like India that will parrot that lines. Now, none of that ecosystem, what the Prime Minister too has referred to in the past as the Lutyens Khan market cabal, even that ecosystem will not bring out these facts. And why? Whether it's scholarships that they get, whether it's the, various junkets that they get, and junkets that are not just funded by Ghulam Nabi Fai and Pakistan's ISI, but junkets that may well be funded by the West These
Yes,
people are beneficiaries of those junkets and will not raise these issues that you are raising. Why? Because you are bringing out the ground realities, and these aspects need to be raised. However, these elements will not do that. Here is a terrorist who's involved in the killing of a Shaurya Chakra awardee in Bhikiwind in India,
absolutely.
and India submitted dossiers, and not just for one man. India submitted 26 dossiers to Canada. India has made a list of those who've been involved in activities. Gurmeet Singh, that's an entire list that the External Affairs Minister has
Yes.
spoken of, the ministry has spoken of. That entire list has been given to Canada. Interpol Red Corner notices have been issued, and yet this West, that entire ecosystem, they refuse to take action against these elements in the name of freedom of expression. Clearly, terrorism is not freedom of expression.
And if this isn't state-sponsored, public-funded terrorism, I don't know what is. Those phrases no longer sound extreme or like exaggerations at all in the context of what's happening in Canada. Gaurav, thanks very much for getting us a perspective on this developing story. Thanks very much for the moment. Also want to get an expert view from India's most respected strategic thinker and columnist, Brahma Chelani. Mr. Chelani, thanks for your time once again on this unfolding story. The Sandeep Singh Sidhu angle, Mr. Chelani, brings a very different dimension to what we've been talking about so far. A man who India has sought the extradition of, who has supplied information about for a long time now, turns out to be a Canadian government employee, and not just any old government agency, but a superintendent in border security, a law enforcement role. How do you see this?
Canada, unfortunately, has become the global hub of the Khalistan militant movement.
Yeah.
And as a government policy, Canada is giving refuge to known militants, terrorists, and other extremists from India. In fact, it's also giving visas to known gangsters despite Indian government warnings. This is the irony of it, that the Indian Foreign Minister has said on record that despite Indian government warnings, specific individuals from Indian Punjab who are known to be gangsters have been given immigration visas by Canada. And the Indian ambassador to Canada, the High Commissioner Sanjay Verma, before he left Ottawa, he said in an interview to Canadian media that Palestinian extremists and terrorists are deep assets of CSIS. CSIS is Canada's main intelligence agency. In fact, Niger, as we all know, was the chief of the Khalistan Commando Force. Look at the irony of it. The Khalistan Commando Force is a terrorist organization in Canada, in the US, in Britain. And yet, Niger was given sanctuary by the Canadian authorities. And his terrorist background has been largely suppressed from the Canadian media. They refer to him as a cleric, as a priest, which he was not. They call him a Sikh leader, which he was not. He became the president of a Gurdwara, but that's how the Sikh extremists are now controlling the funds. They have captured the Gurdwaras in Canada and in the US and in the UK. And but Niger was not a cleric or a priest. But I think the larger issue is this. And in fact, the fundamental issue that we should not forget is that the developments that led to the Air India bombing in 1985, those developments have not changed Canada's approach toward providing sanctuary to Sikh terrorists from India. These Khalistanis who blew up the Air India Flight 182, according to two separate Canadian inquiries, the mastermind of that bombing, Talvinder Parmar, was provided sanctuary, and India's request to Canada to extradite him was refused. Ultimately, despite that bombing, In fact, there were two bombings of two separate Air India flights. One misfired and killed two baggage handlers. But despite these twin bombings,
Yes.
not a single perpetrator was brought to account by Canada. Talvinder Parmar was ultimately killed by police in India after he sneaked into Punjab from Pakistan.
Yes.
But look at the irony of it, that a terrible terrorist act happens, and it took Canada 21 years to set up a commission of inquiry into the bombing.
Yeah.
And I think, in a way, history is repeating itself. To some extent, we should blame the Indian governments. Successive Indian governments led Canada off the hook after the Air India bombing. There should have been sustained pressure on Canada for accountability,
Yes.
for bringing to justice the perpetrators of those twin bombings, which we did not. We exerted no pressure on Canada. And today, Canada has become the international epicenter of the Khalistan movement. It's not just the demand for Khalistan. If it's a peaceful demand for Khalistan, there wouldn't be such an issue. The fact is that these people are glorifying terrorism, and regularly, at regular intervals, they are making terrorist threats against India. Look at the number of hoax bomb threats that Indian airlines have received in the last 10 days or 11 days. Just today, 80 bomb threats were received by Indian airlines. This is totally unacceptable. The guy, for example, the guy who has now publicly issued a video message asking people not to travel by Air India between November 1st and November 19th is based in New York, and he is a dual citizen of US and Canada.
Correct.
Now, how would the US react if somebody who was designated by the US as a terrorist was based in India and issuing these kinds of threats against American airlines or Canadian airlines?
Absolutely.
And I think we need to exert pressure on both Canada and the US because they are working in tandem.
Yeah. How does that happen, Mr. Chelani? How in the context of both the Sandeep Singh Sidhu angle and the other things that you've just mentioned, and completely accepting that successive governments have let Canada off the hook, whether it comes to the bombing of Kanishka or the recent cases that we're talking about right now, including Sandeep Singh Sidhu. What should the Indian government do next? How does it give it back and ensure that Canada and the US don't get off the hook?
Well, first we need to stop being reactive and defensive. Why are we defensive? Look at this guy, Pannoon, who sits in New York, and he's been making terrorist threats against India.
Correct.
Now, earlier he threatened New Delhi airport. According to Indian agencies, he threatened to disrupt Indian railways, etc. This is unacceptable. The fact that somebody releases a video message and warns people not to travel by Air India between specific dates, and yet there's no statement from the government of India asking the US to extradite him or bring him to justice. We should make the demand. For example, in the case that of Mr. Sidhu in Canada, the fact that Mr. Sidhu is an officer of the Border Security Agency, and that he's wanted in India for terrorist crimes. This is an issue that India should be raising. Not just a statement here or saying that this information has been shared with Canada. There has to be sustained pressure on Canada. There's so many of these elements in Canada and in the US. In fact, that reminds me of what the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi said a few months before she was assassinated. She said publicly that the CIA was involved in training and arming Khalistan terrorists in Pakistan. In other words, the CIA was working with ISI, according to Mrs. Gandhi.
Yes.
What she said, and look at the developments that followed. Her killing, now we are talking about the painful memory of the Air India Flight 182 bombing. All these developments could have been averted had
Correct.
successive Indian governments shone a spotlight on Canada's role, on Canada's status as the hub of militant Khalistan movement, especially of Khalistanis who glorify violence and terrorism, and who make terrorist threats against India.
This conversation is going to continue because India's next step continues to be in suspense. The two sides have issued statements against each other, but now there appears to be a lack of clarity of what that next step from either side is going to be, and we will continue to track it. And as always, thank you very much, Brahma Chelani, for joining us and providing your perspective on this unfolding big story between India and Canada. These escalating tensions between the two countries have taken center stage, obviously, as both nations exchange accusations. Canada is under scrutiny for its ties to individuals, like Brahma said, with terrorist and extremist networks. And we've got information on the entire dossier that's been shared by India with Canada. Take a look.
Tensions between India and Canada are escalating amid the ongoing diplomatic standoff over the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar, where Trudeau government is targeting top Indian diplomats. India added Sandeep Singh Sidhu, a Canadian Border Service Agency official, to its list of fugitive terrorists seeking his deportation. Despite his position in Canada's government, Sidhu has been linked to pro-Khalistan terrorist networks. He's accused of playing a key role in the assassination of Shaurya Chakra awardee Balwinder Singh Sandhu, a hero of Punjab who stood against Khalistan terrorists during Punjab's violent period. The terror connections reportedly extend to Pakistan-based Khalistani leader Lakhbir Singh Road and ISI operatives. With charges of cross-border smuggling of narcotics and weapons, India has raised serious questions about how a Trudeau government official could be playing a terror kingpin's role. Despite serious allegations, Canada appears to be protecting individuals connected to extremist groups. Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly went on to put Indian diplomats on notice.
Canadians were being intimidated, victim of extortion, or even receiving death threats because Indian agents or agents and diplomats from India were linked to these criminal actions. We've never seen that in our history. That level of transnational repression cannot happen on Canadian soil.
This comes after Canada Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused India of targeting 6 separatists, further straining ties. Is Trudeau actively facilitating anti-India terror using Khalistani elements? Bureau Report, India Today.
The war for Wayanad is officially on, but is it really a war, or is it going to be a walkover for Priyanka Gandhi Vadra? Wayanad, the verdant constituency in Kerala, is gearing up for what is technically a 3-way contest in this upcoming Lok Sabha bypoll. LDF candidate Satyan Mokeri and the BJP's Navya Haridas formally submitted their nominations for the upcoming by-election a day after Priyanka Gandhi filed her nomination. Mokeri, a senior CPI leader, held a roadshow to the collectorate to file his nomination today. Remember, the left and the Congress are both part of the India Alliance. The BJP's Navya Haridas also filed her nomination today. Haridas has worked for a decade as a councillor in the Kozhikode Corporation. The BJP candidate hit out at the Gandhis, calling their Wednesday roadshow an eyewash and accusing them of gathering a crowd of non-Wayanad residents to show their strength.
Today between 12 and 1 I am filing my nomination, and Bharatiya Janata Party's state and national leaders will be along with me while filing the nomination. I am so excited and happy that party has offered me such a wonderful opportunity. And we started the election work a couple of days back. There is definitely a need from the people that there actually requires a change in the politics. So I think this time it's going to favor BJP.
എത്ര ഈസിയാണെന്ന് ലാഘവത്തോടു കൂടിയാണ് ജനാധിപത്യ പ്രക്രിയകളെയൊക്കെ കാണുന്നത്. ജയിപ്പിക്കുക, ഉടൻ തന്നെ രാജിവെക്കുക. ജനങ്ങളുടെ മുകളിൽ ഭാരം അടിച്ചേൽപ്പിക്കുക. അത്തരമൊരു സാഹചര്യം ഇനിയും ഉണ്ടാകരുത്. ഇനി ഉണ്ടാകാതിരിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി ജനങ്ങൾ ജാഗ്രത കാണിക്കും. ഈ തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പിൽ ഇടതുപക്ഷ ജനാധിപത്യ മുന്നണി സ്ഥാനാർത്ഥിയായി മത്സരിക്കുന്ന എന്നെ വിജയിപ്പിക്കുമെന്ന കാര്യത്തിൽ എനിക്കൊരു സംശയവുമില്ല, LDFിനും സംശയമില്ല.
With Priyanka Gandhi Vadra's nomination, there is a huge storm over her financial assets as part of the affidavit, particularly her tax declaration. The poll affidavit reveals Priyanka Gandhi and her husband Robert Vadra have 80 crore rupees in pending tax to their name. The BJP has hit out, calling this tax chori. Take a look.
Big row over Congress's Wayanad candidate Priyanka Gandhi's asset declaration. While filing nomination, Priyanka showed she and her husband Robert Vadra have combined movable and immovable assets worth 77.55 crore rupees. Priyanka herself worth 12 crore rupees and Robert Vadra 66 crore rupees. But crucially, Priyanka Gandhi admitted that she, along with her husband, has a whopping 80 crore rupees in pending tax dues, which is even bigger than her combined assets with husband Robert Vadra. As per Priyanka's poll affidavit, she has 4.12 crore rupees pending in dues for the assessment year 2016-17, 3.5 crore pending for year 2017-18. 2.39 crore for the year 2018-19. Heaviest tax due of 24.16 crore is pending for the year 2019-20 and 1 crore pending for the year 2020-21. And this has stoked massive controversy with BJP training guns on Priyanka for tax evasion, calling it Gandhi family's tax theft. The BJP attacked Robert Vadra, accusing him of hiding his wealth, claiming his declared assets are much lower than his actual assets.
रॉबर्ट वाड्रा की जो डिक्लेयर्ड नेटवर्थ है.
And we are returning to the India-Canada face-off and meltdown now because India's High Commissioner to Canada, Sanjay Verma, who was pulled out in the middle of this firestorm, has just spoken out. Here's that exclusive interview.
And therefore, there was a request to waive off my diplomatic immunity as well as diplomatic immunity of my colleagues so that we could be interrogated by RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the investigating agency there. So I took that as a message. We diplomats are messengers in any case. So we sent that message back home for advising us what to do.
But for Indians, this is unbelievable. It's like I'm in disbelief and in shock that an ambassador, a high commissioner ambassador, is being told that he is going to be interrogated by the national police of a country. How does that happen?
It doesn't happen in diplomacy. And generally speaking, there will be some kind of messaging to start with. I didn't get that either. And all of a sudden, this was handed over to us. So I would say this demonstrates the distrust. This demonstrates kind of a backstabbing that was done to us by our very professional colleagues in Canada.
And a country that we consider our friends.
Absolutely. Because, both are democracies. Both are countries of rule of law. We have a huge diasporic interest in Canada. We are good trading partners, investment partners, etc. So we had been doing well in the overall canvas of our bilateral relations. And this came to me as a shock. And rest, you know what happened.
Yeah. Did you, how did you take it? Did you take it with equanimity? Were you expecting it in the first place? Or did it come as a complete surprise?
No, I was not expecting it. Generally, such summons I have faced earlier as well in Canada. But in such summons, what happens is that they give you a message to be conveyed back home. And it won't be something of the kind that you yourself are a person of interest in an investigation. So, yes, inside it hit me a bit, but externally, as a representative of 1.4 billion people, I was absolutely calm.
अपने शक्ल पे कुछ नहीं दिखाया?
शक्ल पे बिल्कुल कुछ नहीं, कोई शिकन भी नहीं. तो उन्हें भी ऐसा लगा कि पता नहीं ये कौन सा इंसान है जो इस तरह से व्यवहार कर रहा है. लेकिन मुझे खुशी ये हुई कि मैंने उन लोगों को कोई भी ये खुशी नहीं दी कि ये उदास है.
जी. और या डर गया हूं मैं.
या मैं डर गया हूं.
और आपको सिर्फ 4-5 दिन दिए गए थे कि आप छोड़ के चले जाइए कनाडा.
तो मुझे जो हमारी डेडलाइन थी वो थी 19 अक्टूबर कनाडा का टाइम, ऑटवा का टाइम. कनाडा में बहुत सारे टाइम्स है. तो ऑटवा के टाइम से 11:59 रात्रि अक्टूबर 19.
और अगर आप ना जाते तो शायद आप अरेस्ट भी हो सकते थे.
अगर मैं नहीं जाता तो मेरी डिप्लोमेटिक कम्युनिटी खत्म हो जाती और मैं उनका जो इन्वेस्टिगेटिव प्रोसेस है उसमें मुझको जबरन शामिल किया जाता.
आपने 36 साल के अपने डिप्लोमेटिक करियर में आप जापान के एम्बेसडर रहे हैं, सूडान के एम्बेसडर रहे हैं, कौंसल जनरल रहे हैं कई जगह पे, अब कनाडा के एम्बेसडर, हाई कमिश्नर. आपने बहुत सारे अप्स एंड डाउन्स देखे होंगे. Do you think this is, where would you rank this? Is it like the worst experience you have ever had?
This is the pits. And this is the most unprofessional approach to a bilateral relation. If they really believe that it is a large relationship for them as well, there are other diplomatic tools available in the hands of a diplomat. And those tools could have been used in order to see things falling in place as they had wished.
This is not the kind of behavior or an experience that you would expect from a thriving democracy.
Absolutely not.
And all this is because of the Khalistan problem. Can you just tell us a little bit about the genesis of the Khalistan problem in Canada, basically? How did Canada become a hotbed of this movement?
See, Canada had been a place where migration from India took place from early 20th century, so 1900s, early 1900s. And in fact, first when the first ship arrived there, a Japanese ship which had Indians, at that time we were still a colony of Britain. So when they arrived, the Canadians did not allow them to berth. And many Indians on that ship perished without food. So a lot of atrocities are there in the history on people of Indian origin. And after a lot of persuasion, but also due to fear of a backlash globally, the ship was allowed to dock in Vancouver. Then they got down. So that was the first larger wave of our brothers and sisters going from here to Canada. A number of them were in the Sikh community. They were absolutely patriotic Indians. They kept the Indian flag flying high. They could not get their voting rights till 1940s. Though they were staying in Canada, they were citizens of Canada, but they didn't have the voting rights. They fought for it, they got the voting rights. Then, moving forward, many of pro-Khalistan elements, including extremists and terrorists, they found refuge in Canada. And now I'm talking about 1980s. So they found refuge in Canada due to lenient Canadian legal system. They were able to get their permanent residence in Canada, citizenship in Canada. They sought asylum in Canada on fictitious grounds. And all of them then settled down there. Then they started doing something which was completely against a good India-Canada bilateral relation, from their perspective, Canada-India bilateral relations. And the first such example that we see was bombing of Air India flight Kanishka. When that happened, and we had been tracking some of these conversations which were going on and the Canadian RCMP, which is federal police as well as investigating agency, they were kept fed. That look, these are the conversation and threads that we are picking, and there is a possibility that they will harm Air India flight. But it was not taken so seriously, and that resulted into unnecessary loss of so many lives. 329 on the aircraft. Then there was another bomb which exploded in Narita, Japan, which killed handlers. So many people lost their lives. It took a long time for them to reach a stage where judicial pronouncement could be given out. It took more than 15 years for the first one. And there it was all pro-Khalistan extremists and terrorists.
It's very ironical that the Khalistan movement in India has completely died down. It is sort of flourishing in distant shores, including in Canada. Canada has the largest number of Sikh population outside India. What percentage of that population would you say supports Khalistan?
See, if I look at today, I will not go into the historical projection. So if I look today, I would say that about 10,000 of people in the Sikh community in Canada would be hard-line Khalistanis.
Only 10,000?
Only 10,000. So it's just a handful. But they have made Khalistan into a business. In the name of Khalistan, they do human trafficking, they do drug trafficking, they do gun running. So they earn a lot of money through that. Then a lot of money would be collected in the Gurudwaras, place of reverence and religious worship. And then they would use a part of that money into all nefarious jobs. So what then they do is, since that is the business for them, then these 10,000 intimidate others to join in. So for example, someone will say that, I know where your daughter goes for education, studies. So people get intimidated. So I would say if you take those who are intimidated and those who are hardliner Khalistani extremists based out of Canada, I would put the figure at about 100,000, 1 lakh.
Okay. That's a very small number compared to the overall population.
But they have a huge, they shout aloud. And therefore, the babies are fed who shouts aloud. So therefore they are fed. And they have political influence. They have been
fed by the Canadian authorities, by the Canadian government, Canadian political system.
Canadian system overall. So if today I look at it, almost every Canadian law and order vertical has got in it the pro-Khalistan elements. So that infiltration, and it includes their defense forces. So that infiltration is there, due to which they have been able to get their way. If I look at the Canadian Parliament, there are a number of parliamentarians who are known to have voiced opinions on challenging the territorial integrity of India, sovereignty of India, on record. So as a fellow democracy, I would have thought that they will never talk of disintegration of India or further division of India. Territorial integrity is supreme.
So we'll have to go into the political system of Canada to understand why the administration does not crack down. I mean, to us, it is so logical that here is a group of people which wants to destroy India, to harm India, and they are living in a friendly country, but the friendly country is doing nothing to stop them. Why is it? Is it because the country is made up of a large number of immigrants from different areas? Do they become political constituencies which support the system?
Very much so. How we see Canadian foreign policy, and that's my analysis, I may be absolutely off the track, But it has got a lot of diasporic inputs. And these diaspora which are there in Canada, including diaspora from India, they are stakeholders in their foreign policy. Okay. And their inputs are taken as sacrosanct because they are voters as well. And in order to win elections, the political leaders do depend on them. So when you take inputs from a part of the diaspora, which in any case is anti-India, then what do you get? So your foreign policy becomes that much more colored from their views and opinions.
So the one that shouts the loudest gets the attention.
Gets the attention. And other members of the Indian community, other members of the Indian diaspora, they are there to earn a living. Yeah. They do not have a business as the Khalistanis have. Yeah. So they are there to earn their livelihood. They are there to live peacefully with others. So they are not the ones who would shout the loudest. But these Khalistanis do shout the loudest.
And that is why they get the support of the politicians.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this whole unsavory incident that has happened, is it irreversible or is there a possibility कि अगले साल जब अगर elections होते हैं कनाडा में तो things will become normal?
देखिए, ये जो होना था वो हो चुका है और एक भारतीय होने के नाते, केवल हाई कमिश्नर के नाते नहीं, भारतीय होने के नाते मैं तो यही चाहूंगा कि दोनों देशों के बीच का संबंध बेहतर हो, लेकिन वो बेहतर हो इस कारण से नहीं कि हम बेहतर करना चाहते हैं, बल्कि इस कारण से कि दोनों एक दूसरे की इज्जत करते हैं, दोनों एक दूसरे की सिस्टम को समझना चाहते हैं, दोनों एक दूसरे के जो कोर कंसर्न्स हैं उसको समझे। और हमारा कोर कंसर्न बहुत क्लियर है, कई बार बताया जा चुका है हमारे कैनेडियन मित्रों को कि हमारा कोर कंसर्न है वहां से एंटी इंडिया एलिमेंट्स, जो ये खालिस्तानी एक्सट्रीमिस्ट और टेररिस्ट वहां पर हैं, जो चैलेंज करते रहते हैं इंडिया की सॉवरेनिटी, टेरिटोरियल इंटीग्रिटी को, उन्हें किसी ढंग से उन्हें हैंडल करना पड़ेगा। एक यूनाइटेड नेशंस का मेंबर होने के कारण भी जैसे ही हम संयुक्त राष्ट्र के सदस्य हो जाते हैं तो एक तरह से कन्वेंशन है, मानकर हम चलते हैं कि दूसरे देशों की टेरिटोरियल इंटीग्रिटी और सॉवरेनिटी पे हम बुरी नजर नहीं डालेंगे। तो अगर कोई बुरी नजर डालता है, और ये जितने खालिस्तानी हैं वहां कनाडा में बैठे हुए सब कैनेडियन नागरिक हैं, वो भारतीय नागरिक नहीं है, तो भारत का भविष्य क्या होगा ये भारतीय तय करेंगे, ये विदेशी तय नहीं करेंगे। और वो विदेशी हैं, कनाडा में भारतीय मूल के जरूर हैं वो, लेकिन वो हमारे लिए विदेशी हैं। विदेशियों को हमारे इंटरनल अफेयर्स में इंटरफियर करने का कोई अधिकार न था, न है, न रहेगा।
और किसी का हक नहीं है कि उनको उकसाएं और उनको प्रोत्साहन दें कि भारत में कुछ भी आतंक फैलाएं।
बिल्कुल नहीं, वो तो बिल्कुल क्राइम है। और अगर इस तरह का क्राइम वो करते हैं, चाहे पैसा ट्रांसफर करके, चाहे किसी को उकसाकर, चाहे किसी को इनकरेज करके भारत में वायलेंस करने के लिए, तो फिर भारतीय लॉ जो है वो अपना काम करेगी फिर वहां पे।
भारत ने तो यहाँ तक कहा है कि जो कनाडा के प्रधानमंत्री हैं वो आतंकवाद को प्रोत्साहन दे रहे हैं, तो इस हाल में जो नॉर्मलाइजेशन की जो बात हो रही है वो कैसे हो सकती है? हमने कोई एविडेंस उनको दिया है कि आप इस तरह से प्रोत्साहन कर रहे हैं आतंकवाद का?
देखिए, प्रोत्साहन दोनों तरह से हो सकता है। एक एक्टिवली उनको कहा जाए कि तुम ऐसा करो, और दूसरा है कि तुम करते रहो, मैं चुप बैठूंगा। तो अगर जो क्रिमिनल्स हैं, जो टेररिस्ट हैं, जो एक्सट्रीमिस्ट हैं, उनके अगेंस्ट हम कोई एक्शन नहीं लेते हैं तो वो भी एक तरह का प्रोत्साहन ही है। तो वो प्रोत्साहन वहां पर काफी देखा जाता है, चाहे वो डोमेस्टिक वोट बैंक के लिए हो या फिर कोई और राजनीतिक कारण के लिए हो। इस प्रोत्साहन के कारण वो एम्बोल्डन हुए हैं और वो लगातार भारत के जो इंटरेस्ट्स हैं उसको अटैक करते रहते हैं, उसको हार करने की कोशिश करते रहते हैं।
Related question to this, Prime Minister Trudeau himself is not very popular right now in Canada and is facing a virtual revolt within his own Liberal Party. And there are some suggestions that he's turning up the heat on India so as to divert attention from his own shortcomings. How true is that?
See, I'll not get into the domestic politics of Canada. That's not my job. I should not be doing that. The surveys that I have seen published in the media says that the popularity rating of Mr. Trudeau is going down. It is much below the main opposition party at the moment and its leader. So, and many of the media reports says, and this is not my opinion, that if the elections are held today, then he may find it very difficult to come back to the power. But these are just the surveys. And we know that opinion polls may hold good at times, may not hold good at some other times. But what happens to Canada will be decided by the Canadians during the election. So I will not go there. I will not like to comment on that.
Let's assume that next year when the elections take place, the Canadians decide that Trudeau is not their leader and the Conservative Party comes to power. Now the Conservative Party itself is anti-immigration. It is not as liberal as the Liberal Party in terms of immigration. Wouldn't that have an impact on the relations for the Indian community there? Yes, they are Canadian citizens, but they are of Indian origin, and the anti-immigration stand of the Conservative Party might have an impact on them, and we should be concerned about that?
In the statements on India and Indian community, I haven't seen much support to denying rights to Indo-Canadians.
Well, that's it on 5 Live. Thanks for watching.